And also enjoy our lesson today on rational equations. So yesterday we looked at equations that were a little bit more simple, okay, a little bit simpler. Second degree, third degree, linear, but these are rational. And do you know how we start by solving a rational equation? We find a common denominator, which in this situation is n minus 8. And I'll write it all out here. We have 1 over n minus 8 minus, the 1 doesn't have an n minus 8, does it? So I'll multiply top and bottom by n minus 8. And so we have that equation. Now, here's what we're allowed to do. We're actually going to get rid of, the denominator. And we can do so as long as we identify something important. There's a certain value that n cannot be equal to. Why 8, Grace? Right, it will end up with 0 in the denominator. So as long as we understand that n cannot be 8, we're okay with just ignoring the denominator. So I will now focus on the numerator. 1 minus n minus 8 is 1 minus n plus 8. After we distribute the negative sign, equals 7. So 9 minus n is 7. Negative n is negative 2. N is dos, which is Spanish for 2. Did I come up with 8? No. So I'm okay with that. I just had to make sure I didn't come up with 8. All right. What's going to be the common denominator here? X times x plus 2. Good. Or x squared plus 2x. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by here and get x times x plus 2. I do not need to multiply this, so I have 1. And here, I multiply top and bottom by x plus 2. I've ignored the denominator, which I can ignore it so long as I identify the two x values that I cannot have. What are they? Good. All right. So how are you going to solve this? Multiply it out. X squared plus 2x. X squared plus x minus 2 plus 1. Second degree equation, how many solutions? 2. Get everything on one side. So I'll subtract the x squareds, and what do you notice? They cancel. Subtract the x, we get x is equal to whatever negative 2 plus 1 is, which is negative 1. Is negative 1 a value that's okay to come up with? It is. If it's not, we call it extraneous. Letter C, we have a fraction equal to fraction. What can you do there? Yeah, we have x minus 2 times x plus 1 is equal to 6. Or x squared minus x minus 2 is equal to 6. Any thoughts on how you solve this? Let's bring the 6 over. X squared minus x minus 8. Does it factor? No, if it doesn't factor, what are our options? Quadratic formula or complete the square. Completing the square is the same thing as the quadratic formula. I just, sometimes it's a little bit quicker. Yes. Thank you. You are now invoking a very important property, the sixth property, the sixth product property. Remember? There is no sixth product property, right? Look at that. We don't have a 6 product property. We have a 0. Because if A times B is equal to 0, then we know either A or B has to be. But if A times B is 6, do we know anything? We know nothing. We're all better people for hearing that. Thank you. All right. So here we have it. Quadratic formula. I'm going to make use of that. Some of you think it takes a long time. It really doesn't. Negative b, which is positive 1, plus minus square root of 1 minus 4. A is 1 and c is negative 8. So once you write it out, the only thing that really takes just a little bit of time and thought is the value of the discriminant. The discriminant is the value that sits underneath the radical sign. 1 minus 4 times 1 times negative 8 is going to give me the root of 33, right? 2 negatives is going to make a positive. So I have the root of 33, which cannot be reduced. That is my solution. Notice I have 2 solutions because it's plus and it's minus. Okay. How about letter D? What do you do? But you have to be careful. Anytime you take this, you square both sides, you run the risk of adding a solution that shouldn't be there. For example, if you plug 4 back in, what's 2 times 4 plus 1? If you take the square root of 9, what's the square root of 9? It's 3. But what does it say the answer should be? So in this situation, there is no solution. Take out your study guide, and I'll make my point even further. Look at problem 6F on your study guide. So Gigi and Grace were both thinking about something, asking a question, right? You guys were like, you thought it could be negative 3 as well, right? Let me clarify. This is very important. Nobody explained this to me when I was in high school. It took me a while to understand what we meant. But if you take the square root of x squared and the square root of 9, you are solving for how many solutions? 2. And notice this comes from x squared equals 9, right? Which you could write as x squared minus 9 equals 0. X minus 3 times x plus 3. So you have x is plus or minus 3. So that's why when we square root the x squared, we put a plus or minus in front of here. That's why, okay? But if I just ask you what is the square root of 16, you tell me it's 4, right? You don't tell me it's negative 4, all right? So I'll make my point by showing you this example right here. 6F, we have the square root of x plus 2 is x. As I go through, I'm going to add the 2 or subtract the 2 over, and I get x minus 2. I'm going to get rid of that square root by squaring both sides. If I square the square root of x, I have x. And what do I get if I square x minus 2? Good. Now, pay attention. The largest degree here is 1. Now the largest degree is 2. You maybe added a solution that shouldn't be there. Okay? We run the risk of adding something that doesn't work out. So let's solve. We subtract the x. 0 is x squared minus 5x plus 4. 0 is x minus 4, x minus 1. What are my 2 solutions? Watch what happens when we plug it back in. We plug in 4. What's the square root of 4? Notice you didn't say negative 2, right? You're saying 2, right? Square root of 4 is 2 plus 2, 4. Good. Plug in 1. Square root of 1 plus 2. See that now? Okay, so that's why. Now, why does it give you the 1? Because you take the square root of 1, if you counted negative 1, then you get negative 1 plus 2 is 1, which is what you had, okay? So make sure you plug them back in. And when you take the square root of something, just always list the positive. Okay? All right. That brings us to E. Square root of x plus 1 is x plus 4. How do we solve this? Square it. X squared plus 8x plus 16. Gather everything to one side. Does it factor? So, quadratic formula. (49 minus 4 times 1 times 15). So I got 49 minus 60 is negative 11. Oh no. Say it, Olivia, with confidence. Yeah. You have imaginary, right? So if you factor out a negative 1, because we haven't done a study on imaginary numbers in this class, we're going to. If you said imaginary solutions here, I give you full credit. If you left it as this, I give you full credit. Or if you wrote it as negative 7 plus or minus I roots of 11 over 2, I'd also give you full credit. We just factored out the square root of negative 1, which is I. How about F? Divide the 2. Cube it. X is 61. What happens if I plug the 61 back in? 61 plus 3, cube root, times 2. All right. This is the last part that we're going to do is our quadratic form. Did I tell you about the word quadratic yesterday? How quad and second degree, did we talk about that? Did it ever bother anybody else that quadratic is used to refer to x squared? Bothers me, and I wondered why. Somebody finally told me. Okay, here's why quadratic. So if we have x squared minus 3x minus 4, that's the same as x minus 4 times x plus 1, right? Which is x squared minus 4x plus x minus 4. How many parts are there? 4. That's how it got the term quadratic. Not because of the degree, but because there's 4 parts when you multiply out the binomials. Now, obviously, they combine together to get a trinomial, but that's how it got the term quadratic, which means 4. So, quadratic form can be used to factor pieces that may not be second degree, but might be factored into 4 parts. What times what is x to the 4th? What multiplies 36 as a negative 13? Negative 9, negative 4. Notice that you're going to come up with this middle x squared, right? Well, then these factor x plus 3, x minus 3, x plus 2, x minus 2. How many solutions do I have? plus or minus 2, and plus or minus 3. Next problem doesn't work. If it's a minus, make it a plus. Sorry, forget to change that every year in the notes. I'm always amazed that I remember. Okay, this factor is 3x squared and x squared. Then what? Minus 1, minus 1. Now, how many total solutions should I have? It's very plain to see what the second two solutions are. What should the solutions be here? Plus or minus 1. But this part's a little bit more complicated because you can't factor that. But what we can do is solve by using square roots. So if we simply just subtract or add the 1 and divide by the 3, we get x squared is 1/3. Because I have the x squared, there are how many solutions? So when I square root it, I must list the positive and the negative. That's why we list positive and negatives. If you take square root of 1, if you take square root of 3, nope, so you got to leave it like that. Can you leave the square root in the denominator? No. So you have plus or minus root of 3 over 3. There we have it. And just when you thought your teacher couldn't get any meaner, they throw in fractions. What times what is x to the 4/3? X to the 2/3. Because when you multiply, what do you do to the exponents? You add them. This is actually the difference of two squares, isn't it? So we have x to the 1/3 plus 2 is equal to 0, and x to the 1/3 minus 2 is equal to 0. So x to the 1/3 is equal to negative 2, and x to the 1/3 is positive 2. What do we do to get rid of the 1/3 power? Raise it to the 3 over 1 power. So x is? Good. Does this factor the difference of two squares? No. So we get x to the 2/3 is equal to negative 1. How do I get rid of a 2/3 exponent? What did you say, Gigi? We're not going to times it by 3/2, but rather raise it to the 3/2 power. Very good. And Gigi is seeing here that if you take an exponent to an exponent, you multiply. Well, yes, exactly. And because they are reciprocals, you get x to the 1. So I do negative 1 to the 3rd power. Negative 1. Square root of negative 1. I. Plus or minus. I encourage you this weekend. when you get to your assignment, you get to that type of problem, watch that video portion again and run through it until you convince yourself it works out. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm going to rewrite this one as x to the 1/2 minus 5x to the 1/4 plus 6. This one will be easier. What do I do about that x to the 1/2? What do you multiply to get x to the 1/2? X to the 1/4. And how about, good, minus 2 minus 3. So I'll end up with x to the 1/4 is 2, and x to the 1/4 is 3. How do I solve those? Fourth power. X is 81. And the nice thing is if you plug in 16 and 81 back in there, you do come up with 0. So those are a quadratic form. 10 problems for your homework assignment, approximately. And note that I do understand that you have a fair amount of work from this unit, but I also know that you have a 4-day weekend. Okay. We all have choices, and I promote your decision to go camping. But you're going to have to do math at some time as well.